In the last few years, we have seen hundreds of cold cases that have been solved. Most were solved thanks to advances in DNA technology. Investigators have been able to send DNA samples they collected from victims or suspects to amazing companies such as Othram and Parabon Nanolabs. These DNA companies can then compare that DNA profile to all the profiles that were submitted to public DNA databases. From there, they can build a family tree for the victim or the suspect. Then, partnering with investigators, again, they have been able to identify so many John and Jane Does as well as catch so many bad people that would otherwise have gotten away with it. Of course, there are still plenty of cases that get solved because a witness comes forward, a culprit decides to confess, or investigators finally find the missing link. Today, we will be looking at 3 cold cases that were finally solved in 2022. Before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Raid, Shadow Legends. Raid is the first game I have found that brings a true console-level experience straight to your phone. They have set the bar so high with insanely good graphics and gameplay. There's over 600 champions in the game for you to obtain and play with. Each has their unique skills, so build your team, develop your champions, and raid your way. 2 of the champions I've enjoyed using is Raglan and Royal Guard. Raglan is the best reviver in the game without a doubt. I use her everywhere. Royal Guard has been essential in wrecking bosses for me. He is practically a legendary. Raid recently released a massive new feature called Awakening, along with a brutal new dungeon called the Iron Twins Fortress. Awakening your champions lets you choose a powerful blessing that can transform how they perform in battle. There's even bigger news, because Raid released a super-powered legendary version of Death Knight, Ultimate Death Knight. And the best part is, you can get him for free, just by logging in. All you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and October 27th, and you'll add Ultimate Death Knight to your collection. There has seriously never been a better time to get started, but there's more. You can also use the DK Rises promo code for a bunch of free items to instantly level your new strongest champion all the way to level 50, 5-star Ascension. If you haven't started playing Raid yet, click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion, Rector Drath, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in the game. All this treasure will be waiting for you here. "36-year-old Renee McRae lived in Inverness, Scotland in 1976. She was married to Gordon McRae, though the 2 of them were separated. Renee had 2 sons, 9-year-old Gordon and 3-year-old Andrew. She was described as a devoted mother. On November 12th of 1976, Renee left her home with both of her sons. She dropped Gordon at her estranged husband's house. Thereafter, she turned south on the A9, which is a major road in Scotland. The apparent plan was to visit her sister in Kilmarnock. That was the last time Renee and her son Andrew were seen alive. Later that same night, a train driver spotted Renee's burning BMW in an isolated lay-by. When the police arrived at the scene of the vehicle, it was charred and empty apart from a rug stained with blood matching Renee's blood type. What followed was an extensive investigation. Renee and Andrew's disappearance became notorious in Scotland. Investigators concluded that the 2 of them were not alive anymore, and that the culprit had made careful plans and had disposed of the bodies without leaving any clues. Witnesses on the A9 reported seeing a man dragging something they thought was a sheep, not far from where the car was found. Interestingly, Renee was reported to have been wearing a sheepskin coat when she disappeared. As police investigated, it became apparent that Renee's personal life was not straightforward. In 1971, unbeknownst to her husband Gordon, Renee began to have an affair with William McDowell. William worked for Gordon McRae as an accountant and company secretary, He was married with 2 children. Nobody knew about the affair except Renee's best friend, Valerie Steventon. Valerie revealed that Renee had not been planning to visit her sister that night, but intended to travel to Perthshire to visit William McDowell. Investigators also learned that Renee's youngest son, Andrew's father, was McDowell and not her husband, Gordon McRae's. Renee had first confided to her friend Valerie about her conducting an affair in spring of 1973 when she had been pregnant with Andrew. William McDowell admitted to their affair, but has not spoken about the case since then, except to deny any involvement. The revelation of Renee's 4-year affair led investigators to admit that the case was mired in a sea of deceit and untruthfulness from the start. Detective Sergeant John Cathcart coordinated the search, and after 8 months he had a breakthrough. While excavating Dalmagary Quarry, he was hit by a stench after removing a layer of topsoil. He was convinced it was the sign of corpses, so he continued digging. Unfortunately, he was not able to find anything conclusive, and the case went cold. In 2004, investigators decided to take another look after a documentary renewed interest in the case throughout Scotland. Also, in 2004, Chief Constable Ian Latimer launched a cold case review, which led to £122,000 being spent on an excavation of Dalmagary Quarry. Over the course of 3 weeks, in August 2004, 20,000 tons of earth from the quarry had been excavated and 2,000 trees were removed. All that was found were 2 crisp packets, some men's clothing, and rabbit bones. By August 2006, £250,000 has been spent reinvestigating the case. More recently, the investigation focused on the possibility that the bodies were buried under the A9 road. The A9 was in the middle of a major program of upgrading at the time of the disappearance. An 80-year-old farmer, using his supernatural powers, claimed that the bodies were under the A9. He marked the spot with a yellow circle. A spokeswoman for Northern Constabulary said that after studying aerial photographs taken by the Royal Air Force during the construction of the A9, they were satisfied the bodies were not buried under the road. Finally, in September 2019, detectives from Police Scotland's major investigation team arrested 77-year-old William McDowell in connection with the case. In November of 2021, the 80-year-old McDowell was adjudged fit to stand trial, which took place in Inverness in 2022. Then in September of 2022, more than 45 years after the disappearance, McDowell was found guilty of taking the lives of Renee and Andrew McRae. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison. Lots of little pieces of evidence against McDowell was provided during the trial. A witness said McDowell was seen scrubbing the trunk of his car days following Renee and Andrew's disappearance. A convicted criminal said that he was paid cash to douse Renee and Andrew with acid by William McDowell. It was also revealed that McDowell has made 4 statements to the police. In one statement, he admitted that he was responsible, but later changes his story. Another witness claimed that she saw a man who she thinks is McDowell in the area Renee's burning car was found. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Geddes had this to say following the conviction. Renee and Andrew's family and friends have waited decades for justice, and I hope that the outcome in court today provides some form of closure for them. They have carried themselves with absolute dignity throughout, and they are very much in my thoughts today. On September 30th of 2003, 51-year-old Sandra Garcia's body was found lying on the floor of her southeast Oklahoma City, Oklahoma home, with dried blood on her face, according to a police report. The Oklahoma City Police Department posted on Facebook saying that Sandra had been beaten and she had been stabbed several times in her home. Sadly, it was also revealed that Sandra did not have family members or any known friends. The only person found that knew Sandra was her former convenience store manager, Melissa Woods, who said, "Once she became your friend, she was truly your friend. She'd give you the shirt off her back." Melissa Woods also said that she hoped the person responsible for taking the life of Sandra would be found and justice could be served. Investigators collected fingerprints at the crime scene and items with DNA on it that could belong to the culprit. Unfortunately, the Oklahoma City Police Department did not have any leads until the case was reviewed again in 2017 by the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office and the Oklahoma City Police Department's Cold Case Unit. Gary Knight, who works for the police department, said that with advances in DNA technology, they were able to make progress. Investigators discovered that DNA evidence traced back to two men, Andrew Lewis Canaday and David Yanes. Gary Knight explained, "DNA evidence is not the be-all and end-all in the case. We find their DNA at the scene, but it doesn't tell us exactly what role they played in the crime. But we were able to put the pieces together." It wasn't until an interview with Canaday on May 10th, 2022, that investigators got enough information to file charges. Canaday is already serving time in prison for another criminal felony from 2018. He was booked on 5 criminal felony counts: a DUI, possession of CDS, failure to carry insurance, obstructing an officer, and driving with a license that has been revoked. Canaday has a long history of being in and out of the courtroom aside from these charges. Yanes, on the other hand, took his own life in Dallas, Texas, in September of 2004. Gary Knight said that Yanes is assumed to be the one who took Sandra's life, and Canaday was an accessory. Jessica Pisano, who is the director of victim services for survivors of homicide, said, "One of the things that really hit me hard, on top of not really having friends or family to reach out to, is I can't find a picture of her anywhere. I think that even shows the kind of the isolation that maybe the people that were close to her have passed away." Pisano said that with cold cases like Garcia's, it's hard on family and friends, even after it's solved. Some people don't even really feel as though there is closure. It's just a step-by-step process. And then when you start talking about cases that are cold or that have gone on for a long period of time, it's even more stressful for the families. Cold cases getting solved, though, allows for loved ones to begin the grieving period, according to Pisano. A lot of times, when these cases are not solved for a period of time, families can't even grieve properly. For a lot of people, it brings them back to that first day they found out that they have lost their loved one. So their grieving can start all over again, she added. Pisano said for anyone who is experiencing the loss of a loved one or waiting for a cold case to be solved, you have a right to feel devastated. You have a right to feel angry. You have the right to want these answers. You are not alone in this, but never give up hope, because it takes just one person or one piece of evidence that could solve the case. Pisano encourages anyone looking for help or support to contact her about support groups, dates, and times. Her email and her office phone number is on the screen right now if anyone needs it. Sandra's case is the third cold case investigators have solved this year. They've reviewed 15 so far. Gary Knight said, "It feels good for the detectives, but what makes them feel good about it, for the most part, if I can speak for them, is that it provides relief or closure to the family of the victim." 32-year-old Lee Rotatori was from Nunica, Michigan, and had recently relocated to Council Bluffs to work at the nearby Jenny Edmondson Hospital in June of 1982. She was new to the area and did not have permanent housing, so she stayed at the Best Western Frontier Motor Lodge Hotel for several nights. Lee was married to Jerry Stanley Nemke. He had a past criminal record. On April 29th of 1960, in Chicago, Illinois, at the age of 17, he fatally beat Marilyn Duncan, a 16-year-old waitress, with a brick. He was tried and convicted for that crime. Nemke was sentenced to 75 years in prison, but only served a small part of that sentence. On the morning of June 25th, 1982, Lee's boss called the hotel because she had not appeared for her first formal day of work. When employees went to check on her room, they found her body and turned over the scene to investigators. They found that she had suffered a single stab wound to the heart, and that she had been assaulted. DNA belonging to an unknown male was collected from her body and stored to be used later when DNA technology was more advanced. That time would come in 2019. Authorities then submitted DNA evidence to Parabon Nanolabs in an attempt to identify a suspect. They additionally were assisted by volunteer genealogist and Elizabethtown College student Eric Schubert. Finally, in February of 2021, a match was made. Thomas Oscar Freeman was found to be the apparent owner of DNA found at the crime scene. Freeman's daughter agreed to give a DNA sample which confirmed him as the perpetrator. In 2022, it was announced by authorities. They also revealed that Freeman himself had his life taken by someone else. His decomposing body was discovered on October 30th of 1982. It was determined that his body had sustained multiple gunshot wounds before being thrown into a shallow grave. Police believe that it could be Lee's husband, Jerry Nemke, that took Freeman's life, as they were previous acquaintances. Nemke passed away in March of 2019.